Hello everyone, this is Gene History, and today I'm here with another video where I'm talking about Indo-Jamaicans and especially Dougla Jamaicans, the Indo identity in Jamaica and especially the Dougla identity in Jamaica. So I'm talking about this because a part of my lineage is or descends from Dougla and Indo-Jamaicans, and I haven't heard much discussion about it on the internet or just within my own family. And I have a living member who is a descendant of it, but they don't really address it much at all. So I've been using ChatGPT just to get some additional information and to see what's out there. And it's pretty interesting, actually. And we're going to delve more into how the Dougla identity in Jamaica differs from places like Trinidad and Guyana, and the term passing. Alrighty, so I don't know what prompted me to ask this, but I did ask, did Indo or Dougla Jamaicans pass as black in Jamaica? Here's the response that I got. In Jamaica, Indo-Jamaicans and Dougla Jamaicans, people of mixed Indian and African ancestry, have historically had a complex relationship with racial identity. And whether they quote-unquote pass as black depends on context, social, political, cultural, and even generational. 1. Indo-Jamaicans generally did not pass as black. Why? Indo-Jamaicans descended from Indian indentured laborers brought to Jamaica between the 1840s to 1917 were seen as a separate ethnic group from Afro-Jamaicans. They maintained distinct cultural practices like language, religion, and food, which made them visibly and socially different. That definitely makes sense. There was a mutual separation. Many Indo-Jamaicans maintained distance from both black and white communities, especially early on, and I'm assuming they did this because they just wanted to hold on to their culture. And probably because they didn't think they'd be in Jamaica for that long. In political and census terms, Indo-Jamaicans were not counted as black, but as a separate group. Also, passing wasn't common. Most Indo-Jamaicans didn't identify as black, nor were they seen as such. In fact, there were periods of racial tension between Indo and Afro-Jamaicans, especially over land, labor, and cultural representation. 2. Dougla Jamaicans. Sometimes passed, sometimes not. Dougla is a Caribbean term for people of mixed African and Indian descent, and the racial classification has been more fluid. Yes, some pass as black, especially if they were raised culturally Afro-Jamaican. Their skin tone, hair texture, or features were perceived as more African. They lived in urban or Afro-majority communities where Indian culture wasn't dominant. I think with my relative, who's most likely a Dougla, they wouldn't even confirm it as much, but just based on what I've been told by other family members and the DNA percentages, I do think my relative, who's most likely a Dougla, or who I think is a Dougla, is a black passing one where they decided to pass as black. They did not pass down any of the Indo culture or customs to their children, which would be my older relatives, and because they didn't get it, I and my cousins and my siblings didn't get it either. Others reviewed as Dougla, a distinct identity. This was especially in areas where both Indian and African communities coexisted. So, example, rural areas or parishes with large Indo-Jamaican populations, and I believe the main one is Westmoreland, if I'm correct. Some faced discrimination from both sides, seen as not fully either group. In other cases, Dougla people embraced a mixed or hybrid identity, a bridge between worlds. So here's an overall summary table. Group, Indo-Jamaicans, seen as black, rarely. Cultural integration, often separate. Comments, mainland, or maintained, my bad, strong Indian identity, often viewed as distinct ethnically. Group, Dougla Jamaicans, seen as black, sometimes slash situational. Cultural integration, mixed. It depends on their upbringing. Comments, may be seen as black, Dougla, or both, depending on appearance and culture. So it suggested me to compare Dougla identity and community in Jamaica to Trinidad, which is another country in the Caribbean. And here's what showed up. Dougla identity in Jamaica. Dougla Jamaicans are people of mixed African and Indian ancestry, but Jamaica's specific racial structure means their identity has often been ambiguous or marginalized. 1. They are a numerical minority. Indo Jamaicans make up 6 to 10% of the overall population in Jamaica. So, based on that already small sample size, the Dougla population, which is a mix of the Indo Jamaicans and the Afro Jamaicans, is an even smaller group than that. So, because of that, Dougla identity hasn't been developed into a strong, distinct category like it has in Trinidad or even in Guyana. 2. Cultural identification, often Afro leaning. Most Dougla Jamaicans are culturally Afro Jamaican, especially in urban areas where Indian influence is less visible. If race in black communities, many were seen socially and accepted as black, especially if they had darker skin or African features. Dougla children raised in Indian communities sometimes experience exclusion from both ends. 3. Perception and visibility. Dougla is used but less commonly and less positively than in Trinidad, so I'm assuming they're referring to the actual word. There has been less cultural embrace of Dougla identity as a symbol of mixed heritage or unity. Some are encouraged to quote unquote choose a side, often aligning with the majority, which is Afro Jamaican. Now it is time to talk about the Dougla identity in Trinidad, which is a lot stronger and politically loaded. So, Trinidad and Tobago has a much more prominent Indo Caribbean population, which ranges from 35 to 40% of their population, and Dougla identity plays a more visible cultural and political role. Number 1, demographic significance. African and Indian populations are nearly equal in size in Trinidad and Tobago, which isn't the case in Jamaica. Dougla people are numerically significant, creating a real third identity. 2. Cultural and musical visibility. Dougla identity is celebrated in calypso and soca music. Examples: Mighty Sparrows, born a Dougla. Dougla artists often embrace their dual heritage as a symbol of national unity or complexity. 3. Sociopolitical tension. In a society where politics often fall along ethnic lines, i.e., Afro Trinidadian versus Indo Trinidadian parties, Dougla individuals can be caught in between. Some Dougla Trinidadians feel excluded from both camps, while others embrace a best of both worlds identity. Racial jokes or tensions amongst Dougla people are more common, but so is public discussion about their place in national identity. So here is a comparison table. When it comes to the population size, it is a small, low visibility group in Jamaica, while it's a large, highly visible group in Trinidad. Jamaica is a highly Afro dominated society, so all of the Douglas, which are a small, low visibility, tend to lean that way, while in Trinidad, there's a huge African Indian balance, making their identity more verified and their cultural dominance more verified through this. When it comes to their identity visibility, Douglas in Jamaica are often ambiguous and tend to blend into the black majority, while in Trinidad, they are a distinct and recognized social category. Cultural acceptance, when it comes to Jamaica, it's mixed. There is some stigma or outright invisibility, while in Trinidad, there's more open celebration about it, especially when it comes to politics and music. The socio-political role in Jamaica is very minimal as they largely assimilate to the majority, while in Trinidad, they're caught in between camps or seen as a bridge figure. The terms used in Jamaica is Douglas sometimes used, but it's a lot less common. We're going to get a bit into that. While Dougla is a central identity, or the term is a central component of the language of the identity. So, overall, in Jamaica, Dougla people are often seen as black, especially when raised in Afro Jamaican spaces. Passing is common, but the Indian ancestry may not always be acknowledged. In Trinidad, Dougla identity is more politically, culturally, and numerically significant, but also comes with the challenges of belonging. So I want to get a bit more into their social position in Jamaica into a bit more detail. And one of the main elements is the racial categorization, which is very fluid and situational. Jamaica tends to flatten race into broader categories, mostly black, brown, white, and occasionally coolie, a now offensive term once used for Indians. I'm going to get into this a bit more in just a second. Dougla Jamaicans are rarely counted as a distinct group. Whether someone is seen as black, brown, or Indian leaning often depends on their skin tone and features, their cultural upbringing, i.e., music, religion, and language, or social circles and community setting. So apparently they don't use the exact term Dougla in Jamaica, which kind of exasperates some of the other points mentioned due to the lack of population in comparison to a Trinidad or a Guyana and the invisibility of them. But there are some other local terms and concepts that could be seen as equivalents. One of them is brown. I'm actually making another video on this where I delve deep into it, so look out for that soon. And this is the closest mainstream Jamaican equivalent to Dougla in everyday use. This refers broadly to light-skinned, mixed-race people, often of African and some other ancestry, whether it's Indian, white, Chinese, Syrian, etc. Someone of Afro-Indian background would likely be described as brown if they are lighter skinned. It's more about color and perceived social class than precise ethnic mix. Example, a Dougla person might be called brown in Jamaica, while in Trinidad they'd be called Dougla. And I think my relative who fits this racial group, I do think they would be called brown or they're called brown, especially because they are lighter skinned in comparison. Two is coolie mix up, which is a colloquial and now offensive term. In older generations or rural areas, someone of Afro-Indian ancestry might have been called a coolie mix-up, a term that is now considered outdated or derogatory. Coolie was a common, now pejorative word for Indo-Jamaicans and mix-up, implying mixed race. I remember when I was younger, this was the term that was used to describe Indian people, and a lot of them, whether they're Guyanese or Trinidadian or whatever, they called themselves coolie and they say, "Oh, I'm coolie." So I didn't know that it was an offensive term until recently. This term reinforces how Douglas identity wasn't embraced or legitimized in Jamaica the way it was in Trinidad. 3. Dougla, occasionally used but borrowed. The term Dougla is sometimes used in Jamaica, but more often by people familiar with Trinidadian culture or the wider Caribbean diaspora. And I think my family falls into this because while we are Jamaican or Jamaican descent, we do know a lot of people who are of Trinidadian and Guyanese descent. And a lot of us live around one another, or lived around one another. In Jamaica, it doesn't carry the same visibility, nuance, or sense of identity. It's often used jokingly or with uncertainty. 4. Half Indian, mixed, or dema mix. Everyday Jamaicans might just say someone is half Indian or a mix up to indicate Dougla heritage. These phrases are vague and don't carry cultural meaning, but they reflect how Jamaican racial identity is phenotype and class based, not always heritage based. So ChatGPT provided a chart or a graph or what have you about the cultural identity of Douglas in Jamaica, and it breaks it down by the dimensions and dependency. So when it comes to the language, they generally speak Jamaican Patois, which is the main language or dialect in Jamaica. They generally have little to no knowledge of Hindi or Bhojpuri or Bhojpuri. I'm sure I said that incorrectly. I apologize to whomever for saying that incorrectly, but I'm assuming those are the main Indian languages that came from Indo Jamaicans from when they're in India, based on the location of India. The main religion of Douglas are mostly Christian, especially Pentecostal. A few of them do maintain Hindu or Muslim practices, but it's not a whole lot of them. When it comes to the music and culture, they tend to listen to reggae, dancehall, and Rastafari more. So these are Afro-influenced mainstream Jamaican culture. When it comes to the music and other elements, not really surprising because Afro-Jamaicans are the overwhelming majority. And if they are descended from that, they're going to lean that way too. Food traditions may reflect some Indian influence, especially curry, though that generally just seems to be a thing in Jamaica. No matter what type of Jamaican you are, curry is very much used there. So that's a direct Indian influence that not only Indo Jamaicans use, but often Afro Jamaican food that they use, like rice and peas and a whole bunch of other stuff. When it comes to their appearance, they have a wide range where they could be very light skinned with curls, too dark with wavy straight hair. So there's a very wide gradient when it comes to how Douglas can look. So I want to get into the challenges that they tend to face. And this isn't something that I, as a black person, go through personally. And based on what is shown here, I can see why my Dougla ancestor or relative made the decision that they had to kind of like hide that ancestry from us or to not really talk about it. So, one of the challenges faced is cultural marginalization. So, the society in Jamaica historically gives privileges to clear racial diversity. So, essentially, they are all about monoraciality. Mixedness, especially when it includes Indian ancestry, is often unacknowledged or overshadowed by the dominant black narrative. Emphasis on mixedness, especially when it comes to Indian ancestry. Because mixedness, especially when it comes to white ancestry, is not treated the same in Jamaica. And just from the little that I've researched and known about, even not even beyond just Jamaicans, just in general, whenever you are mixed with white, it gives you privilege. But if you're mixed with something else and not white or black and not white, you tend to be overshadowed or unacknowledged since you don't have white privilege in that way. So I definitely get the cultural marginalization part. The second challenge is faced is colorism. So Dougla individuals with lighter skin or straight hair may be treated differently, often better than darker skinned Afro Jamaicans, leading to privilege, resentment, or internal conflict. My Dougla ancestor is lighter skin, so I'm wondering if that was one of the reasons why they made the decision that they did, or they felt like they had to overcompensate by saying, I'm black, I'm black, I'm black, or I'm Afro Jamaican. And I don't know what they went through with their childhood, especially when it came to dealing with Jamaicans around them who are, on average, a lot darker. And the third challenge that they have to face is discrimination from both sides. In some Indo Jamaican families, marrying African Jamaicans was taboo for generations. So, just this part here really interests me, and I want to do more research on it. I'm in the middle of doing research on it now, so expect another video about this when it comes to tensions between Indo Jamaicans and Afro Jamaicans and the stigma of intermixing or procreating. And then some Afro Jamaican communities treat Indian ancestry with exoticism or suspicion. And that's also something else I definitely want to get into. And you tend to see this with a lot of black people. Whenever they see a non black group of people or someone who is mixed with black and something else, they tend to exoticize that other half. But suspicion means that they also don't trust that other side. And depending on what I find between the relations regarding Indo Jamaican and Afro Jamaican people, there might be something there worth getting into heavily. So this is my first Dougla video where I'm really delving into Dougla Jamaicans, or the proper term might be brown Jamaicans, though I'm making a video specifically about that coming up soon. And just from this little bit that was covered here, I definitely understand more my ancestors' choice to, I guess, pass might be the word, or to not really talk much about the Indian heritage, especially because they are such a huge minority, and it's easier to just be with the black majority, and the potential tensions between the Indo Jamaicans and the Afro Jamaicans, and even the comparison between how they are to the Dougla Trinidadians definitely gave me a lot of insight. Anyways, thank you all for watching, and I'll be back with more soon. Take care.